Hi, friends. I'm Colleen Dieter, landscape consultant, certified arborist, and founder of atxgardens.com. Welcome to the ATX Gardens podcast, where every other week I share simple, timely tips to help your garden thrive. Whether you're a seasoned green thumb or just getting started, you'll learn exactly what to do in your Central Texas garden right now. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and find even more gardening resources at atxgardens.com. Hey there, gardening friends. Thanks for joining me today for episode 7 of the ATX Gardens podcast, which will air on December 11th, 2025. I'm your host, Colleen Dieter, landscape consultant at atxgardens.com. Today's episode is all about what to do to be a successful gardener in the second half of December in Central Texas. But before we get to our gardening to-do list, this episode is sponsored by my landscape consulting business, atxgardens.com. I help my customers by alleviating their anxieties about their yards. This week, I answered questions for a customer who wanted to plant fruit trees. They had tried some fruit trees already and were not successful. Fruit trees like apples and pears and peaches are divided into subgroups called varieties. Certain varieties of fruits are adapted to geographic locations, and if you choose the wrong varieties, you will not get any fruit, and the tree might even die. I helped those customers choose the right varieties that are better suited for their location so they can try again and be successful. If you have questions about fruit trees or any yard projects, make an appointment with me at atxgardens.com. Okay, now let's get to the show. So, what we should be looking for in general in the second half of December in Austin is freezing weather. So keep a close eye on the weather forecasts for freezes and be ready to move or cover your tender tropicals and other plants that are not cold hardy. If you don't know what kinds of plants you have already, take some time now and get to know them. Find out if they're native to this area or if they might need some extra care this winter. For example, if you're new to gardening, you might not know that many plants in Austin are perennials, meaning the tops of the plants die in the winter during the first freeze, but the plants grow back from their roots in the spring. New gardeners often mistakenly think that they've killed their plants in the winter, but the plants are simply going through their natural cycles. Okay, now our crop of winter weeds is starting to sprout now. And like I said in the last episode, the key to success with winter weeds is identifying the seedlings and learning what they look like when they're small. And so listen to the last episode for more details about identifying winter weeds and deciding which ones to pull and which ones might be good volunteer plants that you might want to keep. At my house, I have a winter weed called Japanese rescue brome, and I've been using my handy weeder to knock down the seedlings while they're still tiny, and it saves me lots of time later so I don't have to pull them when they're bigger. See my show notes for links to the handy weeder. You might start to see thistles and other dandelion-like weeds popping up in places where you don't want them. Like I said in the last episode, I tend to keep dandelions in my yard because I eat them, but there's a lot of plants that are similar to dandelions that are not edible, and it'll be really important for you to identify them. Thistles and dandelions have long tap roots, so it's a long, thick, skinny root that grows straight down into the ground, and it makes it really hard to pull the plant out. And for plants like that have tap roots, I like to use the Fiskars uproot weeder or a digging fork to remove them, and we'll have links in the show notes to both of those tools. If you're weeding a very large area, it makes sense to use multiple weeding tools. So that way it prevents you from straining your body from making the same repetitive movements over and over again. So take a break, switch to another tool, then you use different muscles and different parts of your body if you're doing a lot of weeding for a long period of time. It's really easy to wear yourself out. Late December and getting into January is a very good time for removing woody weeds like ligustrums, privets, and nandinas because they're easier to identify at this time of year because most of our native woody plants have lost their leaves. And these evergreen invasive plants are easier to distinguish. There are some good native plants that are evergreen, like Yopon hollies and Mexican silk tassels. So make sure you know which plants you want to keep and which ones you want to remove. All of these plants go dormant in the winter, so it's more satisfying to cut them down at this time of year because they won't grow back right away. They won't grow back until springtime. If you're really looking to completely remove them and have them not grow back, you can get a tool called a puller bear that you can use to wrench them up out of the ground, or you can dig down around the trunks and use a reciprocating saw to cut through the roots and the main trunk to remove them. Okay, and there will be links to those tools in the show notes too. Moving on to more about woody plants. Now that the weather is cool and the trees are losing their leaves, most of the trees have lost their leaves by now. It's okay to do some pruning on them. You know, most shade trees and small trees around here, they don't need pruning for their own health, okay? You can prune them to prevent them from being injured by rubbing on a roof, getting hit by cars if they're growing into roads or driveways. And you can also prune them for aesthetics to raise their canopy a little bit, to make them look a little nicer. That's okay. Just make sure not to remove more than 25% of the overall tree canopy in 1 year. So don't take off more than 25% of the whole tree at 1 year. Now, I'll be teaching a tree pruning class at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and more on that later in the episode. This time of year is a good time on cold days to prune oak trees. We have to be really careful with red oaks and live oaks. They can get a disease called oak wilt. And pruning in the winter is a good time to prune them so that they won't get oak wilt, because oak wilt is carried by a beetle that is attracted to oak trees that have open wounds. And when you prune the tree, you're creating an open wound on the tree. So at this time of year, when the temperatures are colder, the beetles are dormant and they tend not to be active at this time of year. So if you prune the trees at this time of year, they're less likely to get an oak wilt infection. And that's just with the live oaks and the red oaks where we really need to be worried about that. Oak wilt is a treatable disease, but it's very expensive and difficult to treat. And it's much easier to prevent your trees from getting oak wilt than it is to treat them for it. So if you need to trim your live oaks and red oaks, December is a good time to do it. On the coldest days is a good time, and make sure you paint those wounds after you prune them, and you only have to paint red oaks and live oaks to prevent oak wilt. You don't have to paint the wounds on other species of trees. So again, make sure you know what kinds of trees you have so that you know how to treat them. Okay. And I'll have a link in the show notes to the Texas Forest Service website all about oak wilt for more information. Okay, now moving on to fruit trees for mid-December. For a good selection of fruit trees and to get healthier trees, it's a good time now to plant bare root fruit trees. So a lot of the local nurseries and online nurseries will carry bare root fruit trees, and those are trees that come packaged in a plastic sleeve with their roots contained in paper or sawdust. And it's a traditional old way of packing and shipping trees because it's lighter weight that way to ship them. If you can get a really small bare root tree and plant it at this time of year, you'll be more successful than you will be in general with older containerized trees, trees that come in pots. And you can trim that tree, the fruit tree, when it's tiny, a tiny bare root tree. You can trim it to be the exact shape and size that you want to keep it really, really small and manageable. Next episode, I'll talk a lot more about bare root fruit trees. Womack Nursery and Leg Creek Nursery are two Texas suppliers that I like for bare root fruit trees. Now we're at the middle of the show, so we're going to have a sponsor break. Hi, y'all. This is Colleen Dieter with atxgardens.com. You know, I give plenty of gardening advice on my podcast, but there's nothing like meeting in person to get the best information for your plants and landscape. And that's what I can do for you. Visit atxgardens.com. As a certified arborist and professional gardener, I've been giving advice to do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. I help my customers by alleviating their anxieties about their yards. Visit atxgardens.com to book a consultation with me. During the consultation, we'll walk through your yard together and answer all of your questions. Also at atxgardens.com, you can shop Colleen's favorite things. That's gardening apparel, tools, and books that I often mention during the podcast. From trees to vegetables to wildflowers, I'm here to help. Make an appointment at atxgardens.com. Okay, now back to the show. For mid to late December, perennials and bulbs. Do not plant, divide, or transplant any warm season perennials until early spring. Start looking for your emerging cool season bulbs and perennials. My Dutch irises, spiderworts, cardoons, and snowdrops, and yarrow are all starting to grow their leaves now. You can plant cool season perennials now, but it's really too late to plant bulbs. If you have bulbs already, put them in the refrigerator, keep them in the crisper in a paper bag, take them out of the plastic because plastic can cause them to rot, keep them in the crisper, and then you can plant them later in January. And I'll include that in future episodes of the podcast. Now, for vegetables and herbs, again, watch out for freezing weather. Keep the garden soil moist and be ready to cover the vegetable garden if there's freezing weather coming. And in the last episode, I talked a little bit about how planting vegetables and herbs is a little controversial at this time of year, depending on who you ask. Some folks say planting all of the cool season greens like arugula, lettuce, collards, and root vegetables like beets, turnips, and carrots now is okay. And the same goes for cool season annual herbs like calendulas, fennel, cilantro, and dill. But other folks say to wait until late January because the repeated winter freezes can do a lot of damage to tiny seedlings and it just stunts their growth. So it all depends on your risk tolerance and what you're willing to try. If we have a few weeks of warm weather with no freezes, then you certainly could successfully start all kinds of cool season vegetables and herbs. So think about that. Think about how much risk you're willing to take on. Definitely, if you can get seeds from the local seed libraries, that helps a lot. I'm the founder of Central Texas Seed Savers, and we provide seeds for the local libraries in the Austin Public Libraries. You can go and get seeds from the library, and you can also bring seeds back to the library to share. So if you're worried about, wasting money on planting vegetables at this time of year, if they don't succeed, you could get free seeds from the library. Or maybe have a seed swap with your friends where you can share seeds. Maybe you have leftover packets of seeds that you're not going to use. You could trade them with friends. This is a good time to plant artichokes, asparagus, and cardoons from crowns. And you can also plant strawberries and other berry plants as crowns now too. And that's sort of like the same thing as the bare root fruit trees, where they come just as a little bit of stem and then a little bit of root packaged in sand. And sometimes the local nurseries will carry crowns, or you can order them online and they'll be shipped that way. And this is a good time of year for planting them. Okay, and then for certain warm season crops, it's best to start them indoors as seeds because their life cycle is very long. So there's certain vegetables and herbs and flowers that take longer than 80 days to mature. So here in Austin, if you're going to put a seed directly into the ground, and have it grow to maturity to be able to harvest it, usually it needs to come to maturity in less than 80 days because our seasons are so short here. So usually tomatoes and peppers, for example, take longer than 80 days to mature. So you have to start them indoors first to get the seeds to grow into little plants. And then you can plant the little plants into the garden after the first freeze has passed. The last freeze at Camp Mabry in Austin is around February 20th on average. The last average freeze at Austin Bergstrom Airport is March 5th, and the last average freeze for Great Hills neighborhood is February 25th. So usually if you want to start warm season crops indoors, you want to do it about 2 months or more before your last freeze. So that way you've got about 6 to 8 week old little plants that you're planting out into the garden after the last freeze. Okay, so you got to count backwards. So that means around January 1st is usually time to start planting your warm season vegetables, flowers, and herbs that require more than 80 days to come to maturity. All right, so start planting those guys now indoors. Tomatoes and peppers. And the advantage of planting them from seed is that you can get a lot more plants for the money, and you can plant all kinds of special varieties that you might not be able to find at the nursery. Now, if you only need a few plants in your garden, then you may be better off just buying those plants at the nursery or getting plants from friends who started them indoors early on their own if they have extra plants. But a lot of people love starting their own plants from seeds, and now is the time to start getting to it. So that's exciting. And don't forget about saving seeds from your crops that do really well for you. Don't forget about the seed libraries and sharing seeds with your friends too. If you planted wildflowers in the fall, start looking for your little seedlings to be emerging now. Learn to identify those little seedlings as they grow so you don't accidentally pull them up. Okay, make sure you know who they are coming up. It's very exciting. You should start seeing some little bluebonnets and your spring wildflowers, just the little plants starting to grow now. Okay, and they'll stay little plants all winter until the beginning of March, and then they'll start growing taller and taller and taller, and then they'll bloom. All right, so now there's some events coming up that I want to tell you about. On December 13th, from 10 to 11 a.m., my friend Scott Blackburn is teaching a vegetable gardening class at the Natural Gardener. His presentation will cover crop selection, interplanting strategies, and season extension. He'll also cover the essentials for maintaining a thriving vegetable garden from late fall through early spring. Okay, January 17th at 9:30, from 9:30 to 11:30 at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, I'll be teaching a class about tree pruning. So you'll learn all the basics about how and why you need to trim your trees. And then on January 31st, from 9:30 to 11:30 at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, I'll be teaching my classic winter maintenance class. So we'll be talking about how and when to trim all your perennials, and we'll be talking more about winter weeds. A lot of the things that I talk about in the podcast here will be covered in depth in that course. So check those out, and we'll have links to register for those classes whenever they go live. I don't think they're live yet. So that wraps up today's episode. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to the tools, plants, and events that I mentioned. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with a fellow gardener. It really helps more Central Texans find the show. Thanks again. I'm Colleen Dieter with atxgardens.com, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the ATX Gardens podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please follow, rate, and share it with your fellow Central Texas gardeners. For show notes, tools, and to book a consultation, visit atxgardens.com. Happy gardening, and I'll see you next time.